The Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Netanyahu doesn't go to Mandela's funeral. Gelman talking Jewish with the famous producer. Orthodox Jewish feminists gather. And more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Israel drew international attention this week for what it didn't do. The funeral of former South African President Nelson Mandela was attended by nearly 100 heads of state, including President Barack Obama, as well as 3 past presidents of the United States, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Jimmy Carter. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not attend, citing the potential cost of such a trip. Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein led a small delegation of members of Knesset instead. Making fewer headlines is an episode of international cooperation among Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. The 3 governing bodies signed a pact to share in freshwater resources. New infrastructure will include a desalination plant to provide fresh water for all 3 parties. The pact also calls for a pipeline to bring water from the Red Sea to refill the Dead Sea, which has been losing water. The total project is estimated to cost several $100 million. And more direct international engagement continues with Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. Secretary of State John Kerry is making another visit to Israel and Palestine this month, his second visit in 2 weeks. As the push for an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal continues alongside the implementation of a recent deal on Iranian nuclear development, it's increasingly being noticed that the endpoints for both are quite close to each other in the late spring of 2014. While all suggestions that the 2 deals are linked have been downplayed by U.S. and Israeli administrations, foreign policy observers are murmuring that that seems not to be the case. But Netanyahu's government is also trying on its own to deal with a different population in Israel, illegal immigrants, primarily from Africa. And the Knesset has now passed a law that allows for legal immigrants to be held for up to a year without trial. The law is a response to a recent Israeli Supreme Court ruling that struck down a previous law which allowed for a 3-year detention without trial. It is estimated that more than 50,000 African illegal immigrants are currently living in Israel, many of them having fled dangerous situations in their home countries. But when it comes to the discussion of Israel here in the United States, Jewish students at one college campus are making it clear they won't be held to the proposed restrictions of the world's largest Jewish student organization. Hillel, which has a presence at more than 500 universities, recently produced a set of guidelines regarding discussion of Israel and partnership with other organizations regarding Israel. The International Hillel organization says, quote, Hillel will not partner with, house, or host organizations, groups, or speakers that as a matter of policy or practice delegitimize, demonize, or apply a double standard to Israel, or support boycott of, or divestment from, or sanctions against the State of Israel, among other activities that Hillel has deemed hostile to Israel. A clear rejection of that policy came from the Hillel chapter at Swarthmore College. The student board there voted unanimously to call itself an open Hillel that would, quote, encourage inclusivity and open discourse at campus Hillels, and that Swarthmore Hillel, quote, will host and partner with any speaker at the discretion of the board, regardless of Hillel International's Israel guidelines. And now the campus chapter is being warned that it may face penalties for refusing to comply with the Hillel organization's policies. Hillel's president and CEO Eric Fingerhut wrote to the Swarthmore chapter saying that the chapter's approach is, quote, not acceptable, adding, quote, I hope you will inform your colleagues on the student board of Swarthmore Hillel that Hillel International expects all campus organizations that use the Hillel name to adhere to these guidelines. No organization that uses the Hillel name may choose to do otherwise. Meanwhile, another group was convening this weekend to discuss issues of openness and change. The Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance held its quadrennial conference on Sunday in a year when many of the topics on Orthodox feminist minds are the ones making headlines around the globe. Rebecca Honig-Friedman reports.
It's been 3 years since the last conference of JOFA, the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. But this year, the organization is expanding its focus beyond its traditional agenda. About 1,000 Orthodox feminists and others interested in the cause gathered this weekend at JOFA's Voices of Change conference, held at the John Jay College for Criminal Justice in Manhattan, for panel discussions and learning opportunities related to gender issues in Orthodox Judaism. Many of the issues covered at this year's conference were ones that have always been at the core of JOFA's agenda, like creating opportunities for women's communal and spiritual leadership and finding solutions for agunot, women chained in marriages with recalcitrant husbands. But this year's lineup was notable for the ways in which it focused on the personal rather than the communal, and looked beyond the challenges faced specifically by Orthodox women. For For the first time, the conference included sessions showcasing the voices of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, or LGBT, members of the Orthodox community. Rabbi Stephen Greenberg, the first openly gay Orthodox rabbi, is co-director of Eshel, a community and advocacy group for LGBT Orthodox Jews.
I think in the past there was the fear that if the feminist community broadened its scope to include this issue, it would be actually a disempowering frame, and actually perhaps it's the shift in American culture that's made it seem like it's hard to resist that coalition is actually strengthening of both communities.
The conference was the first under the tenure of JOFA's new executive director, Alana Stockman, who said the broader agenda resulted not from a conscious decision to change focus, but a natural evolution of the organization.
You know, when JOFA started, it started with a particular problem of the status of women in Judaism. And as we gain greater consciousness about that, suddenly we're aware of so many other ways in which we have issues that we really need to deal with, problems that we really need to fix. So feminism is here to help us, to provide us with a tool to resolve a lot of societal issues that we have going on in the Orthodox community.
The conference also included voices from outside the Orthodox world, including at the panel on Women of the Wall, a group that considers itself pluralist, but is often thought of as affiliated with liberal egalitarian streams of Judaism, and has met with much opposition from some segments of the Orthodox community. Of the inclusion of such controversial subjects, JOFA founder Blue Greenberg, who is no longer active in the day-to-day of the organization, was pleased.
I probably wouldn't have been as daring, but I'm proud that the organizers were unafraid. It doesn't mean that you have to embrace everything you learn, and it just means that you open up your mind a little more on these issues.
For more from the JOFA conference, watch the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Rebecca. Gelman is a name familiar to many TV viewers. It's spoken by some of the most famous folks to an often off-camera figure who works the show live from behind the scenes. Michael Gelman has been working it live for 30 years and has been executive producer for almost all of them, through the tenures of Regis Philbin and Kathleen Lee Gifford, on to Kelly Ripa and Michael Strahan. Meredith Gansman visited Gelman on set and got the story behind the man who's behind the cameras.
For over 30 years, audiences of the popular morning show Live have become as familiar with its executive producer as its hosts. I'm on the set of Live with Kelly and Michael for a special interview with the man who you've come to know as Gelman. There's really nothing like the excitement of live television for Live's 26-year executive producer, Michael Gelman.
It is real work, but it beats a real job. Seeing the audience every day and feeling their excitement and letting that energize you really makes this job different.
Unlike most executive producers, who you may find in a control room or an office during a broadcast, Gelman is on set for the entire show, even before the cameras start rolling.
I actually still warm up the audience, which I did in the local days. We always did it to save money, and so I would do the warm-up. But it really now has become an essential part of the show because people know me, and then during the show, I just feel that I have the most effect on what goes on while I'm down here, and whether I'm, writing a cue card or screaming something out. I'm a part of the show off camera, and occasionally, as you know, it bleeds to the on camera.
Gelman's turn on camera began through, who else? Live's original host, Regis Philbin.
Regis started talking to me off camera. It was kind of one of his shticks that he did. I was a good straight man for him because I just smiled and nodded and let him do his thing. And it became an ongoing bit because I was around for so long.
So Gelman, in addition to executive producing the show, portrays a character on its stage.
Well, Gelman is the downtrodden TV producer who any time anything goes wrong, he's to blame. Plus, at the same time, Gelman is the guy who's a little bit like the father. So if there's ever a problem, I'm solving it. I have to keep things calm, keep the children in their place, and so they play their role as bratty kids to the very calm and controlling producer Gelman.
But it was hard for Gelman to keep calm when, after 28 and a half seasons, Regis retired as the host of Live.
So that was tough. but we wanted to do something that was worthy of, of his legacy. And so we worked on that show for, almost a year of really thinking through it. And I was very proud of that show. And that was actually a show that won us an Emmy after all these years. He called me recently, having popped the tape in and looked at it again, and was very complimentary, and I was very happy to hear from him.
Gelman has seen Live go from local to national syndication through different hosts.
I'm the last man standing.
But that doesn't mean he doesn't think about his life beyond Live.
Hey, when my contract comes up, I'm always thinking about, do I want to continue?
To see more from Live with Michael and Kelly's executive producer, Michael Gelman, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. The average American Jew probably knows no more about individual members of Knesset than they do most members of Congress. If they're in leadership positions, sure, you've heard of them, but most are just anonymous figures. Ruth Calderon is an exception. Since her inauguration speech at the Knesset went viral, the Talmud professor has received acclaim stateside, honored by the UJA this past October, and scheduled to receive an honorary doctorate from the Jewish Theological Seminary in May. In her visit to the States this week, she stopped by TJC Studios for an interview, and here are the highlights. In the speech for your inauguration, you basically gave a shiur, a Torah lesson, a Talmud lesson.
A small example, because I did want to say
with
that. With
source sheets and everything, you made everybody follow along.
Yeah, I did bring some. I did what we, all of us in Yesh Atid, in my party, we are not professional politicians. We come from another profession or another career. And so when we introduced ourselves, and I felt the right thing to do is to do what I did until now, which is adult Jewish education, and, Jewish renewal, and so on. When we came into the Knesset, Shai Piron, who is the Minister of Education, and myself, founded a Bet Midrash. So we study, now he can't come anymore because he's working all the time. But we meet every Tuesday and we study for an hour. And that also, again, like it's the most natural thing, but it's a big deal for the Knesset.
It's interesting, particularly in your example, and I've noticed in the rhetoric that you use in your interviews, that you refer to yourself as secular. But no one in America would refer to you as a secular Jew because you identify with the Jewish renewal movement, because you study a great amount of Talmud. You're a PhD in Talmud, but you study it anyway.
Yeah. I studied Torah Lishma. It's true, a few things I want to say. One is that Bible studies, a class of Bible has always been in the Knesset, because Bible is something that belongs to everyone. This is, the builders of Israel, the first generation, they did choose to study only Bible and be kind of separated from Rabbinic Judaism, because they thought Rabbinic Judaism goes with diaspora, and they wanted to become new Jews, different kind of Jews. And it is us, the third generation, that realizes that ignorance is never power. It's always weakness. And that I had to kind of refine something that is so old and understand that in Rabbinic classic text, there's such a tremendous fortune for us, and that I need both for my political work and for my life. The discussion between us inside Yesh Atid, which has different kind of people. It's not a party only for one community. Our constituencies, from ultra-Orthodox Chaver Knesset Dov Lipman to Aliza Lavi, who is Orthodox, and Shai Piron, two very secular people on the other side. When we discuss between ourselves and then negotiate with Beit Yehudi, I feel we come out with legislation that is really good for a big majority of Israelis. For example, I was working with Aliza Lavi on civil union. Civil union is a way to solve problems of people who cannot or don't wish to get married through the Rabbanut.
Right, and in Israel, the chief rabbinate governs weddings and says that it must be by and large an Orthodox ceremony with an Orthodox rabbi.
Yes,
present.
and only one way, and all the people that are not considered. There are many people on the
right. The considerations of whether you're Jewish, whether
and
you're observant,
what kind of Jewish, and what kind of
right. And so a great many Israelis get married
outside
the country.
Yeah. Outside the country, exactly. There's no way to go to City Hall and just enlist yourself as a couple. The option that we are trying to put forward is a civil union that you can do in an office with a it's not exactly a judge, but a person that can be a
magistrate of sorts, yes.
And then you write yourself, and it is not hurting the Rabbanut, the way of Jewish marriage in an Orthodox way, but there is another way for any two people who want to unite. And that does not happen in Israel yet. And once that does, people will not have to go to Cyprus, or, you can't bring your parents, and it is very costly. And so that is like a simple thing when you think as an American, but it's a very big deal in Israel.
You can see the full interview with Ruth Calderon in the interviews category under TJC Original Series on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.